Welcome to Skol Sessions, the Viking Athletics podcast where strength meets smarts. I am your host, Erik Castiglione, owner and head coach at Viking Athletics. And for this month's podcast, I will be joined by Coach Nivi Carbonell. Coach Nivi joined us back in September, and his history as a collegiate athlete and a Marine give him a unique insight into the topic of mindset. So that is what we're going to be talking about, is mindset, mentality, how you can adjust yours and hopefully reframe your way of thinking to help achieve your goals. We hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned. All right, today I am joined by Coach Nivi Carbonell, who recently joined our staff here at Viking Athletics, and we're going to be talking about mindset. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And before we delve into the topic, I like to give a little background info on our guests and specifically why this is an important topic to you. So if you wouldn't mind, a little bit of your background. Obviously, you were a collegiate swimmer. Yeah. You're a Marine. And so mindset has got to be hugely important for both those things.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I will say kind of growing up, I wasn't growing up in like the best household in the world. So mentally and emotionally, I was kind of beat up, so to speak. So my mentality throughout like grade school leading into college was kind of probably not a very healthy one. And that's what kind of eventually led to the change of like enlisting in the Marine Corps after about a year of college. So the idea of switching your mentality from one to another and kind of doing like a 180 pivot, it was very appealing, and that's exactly what I got out of the deal in terms of that. So mentality has been like a huge thing for me, just because it doesn't necessarily mean that people are like born a certain way. Oh, you can only be this thing. Leaders are only born and that's it. They can be made. So the idea that you can kind of change your mentality, change the habits that you do on a daily basis for even like the smallest thing is kind of huge. So yeah, that goes without speaking, but obviously we were going to talk a lot about it right now, but it's a huge topic. It's probably like my favorite thing to talk about, honestly.
Okay. Well, then let's start with the very basics. I know obviously there are trends in the fitness world that we see on a regular basis, and mindset is, I don't want to say it's become a buzzword, but it's certainly a popular topic. And there are people that are always preaching certain things, gratitude, this, that, and the other thing. So what do we mean when we say mindset?
So I think the first way to kind of define it is we got to figure out what kind of mindset do we originally have, like right now. There's a very popular model. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset that comes with it. Fixed mindset, to be as like generic as I possibly can, is basically they believe that there's little that they can control, that it just, whether it be like genetics or whether it be like, oh, that's just the way I am and there's nothing I can do to change it, they're kind of closed off and locked away into this small box, or they put themselves into this small box and not exactly allowing them to grow outside of that. And
so you would call it, another popular term is more of a victim mindset.
Yeah.
And that's kind of along those same lines.
Yeah, and it definitely goes that way. And that's like, they're definitely afraid of failure, which is always a very telltale sign. It's like, I don't want to do something because I know I'm going to suck at it, so why am I going to bother doing it to begin with? And when there's value with making the attempt, right? It's not necessarily about failure, it's about making the attempt. And that's kind of where you start to see the differences, and where we kind of start to lean and push people to become more of that growth mindset, where you're not necessarily fixed into that box, right? You're not placing yourself into that box. You're more than willing to take the experience, whether it's going to be going your way or not, right? We're all afraid of failure. So even if we do come up short, we find value in at least the feedback of what may occur, so we can kind of use that to grow and kind of move on from there and see how we can use it to our advantage, learn lessons from it, because it's not necessarily like a win or loss, right? Because I think we like to equate things black and white when there's a lot of things in the gray that we can do with that, right? Like, hey, I missed a lift. That's like the most common one, right? Everyone has that moment where, especially when we're going heavy, like recently we were going heavy for the snatch and the clean, and how we had a couple people like in class make an attempt at a weight, but like halfway through the first pull, suddenly they just stop and like, no, I can't do it, and kind of give up. And like, wait, well, give it an honest effort. Don't just stop halfway. You never know. What's the worst that's going to happen? You miss, it doesn't go all the way up, you can't hit lockout, or you sit it down and suddenly like, I can't get out of the hole, and you have to dump it. Well, at least make a valiant effort. And it was surprising to them how some of them kind of actually nailed the lift after something like that. Sometimes we get into our own heads. Sometimes we get in our own way, thinking like, oh, as soon as we feel uncomfortable, fight or flight kind of takes over, and we're like, okay, I need to step back. I need to step away from this because it's making me uncomfortable, and I don't think I can do it.
So in order to have that kind of growth mindset, there needs to be a willingness, even a humility, where you're going to make yourself vulnerable, and it's the acknowledgement that you may or may not be, I don't want to say successful, let's call it perfect.
Yeah. Because we're always striving for perfection, but we're never going to achieve it, ever.
So kind of a perfection is the enemy of progress sort of idea there.
Yeah. And then where we can kind of go from there, once we kind of learn to shift our focus, kind of like which one are we? Okay, how do we start shifting from that fixed mindset if you are someone that's a fixed mindset? And now when I say fixed mindset, we gave like a very broad definition. We gave a very broad like scenario, like, but it could be for little things too. Like, hey, I decided to get home and you know what, I ordered takeout because I'm a bad cook and that's just the way it is. It's like, well, you can get better at that. Cooking takes practice. Takes plenty of practice. I sucked at it for a very long time, but you know, the more you do it, the more you practice it, suddenly you start getting better and better and better. And you know what works, you know what doesn't, you know what food you like, you know what styles of cooking you would like to do. And it starts out very small, but it's those very small things that translate to bigger things later, because it starts off small, but then it gets bigger. And the idea is we want a snowball effect. Make a small, teeny change in one little area, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and it leads to other things in life. Because this entire discussion can go well beyond fitness. We're just using the scope of fitness to give examples for it, to kind of show how you can implement it using fitness as the medium. But then if you apply that to everyday life, like how my relationships at home, if I apply that to work, if I apply that to how I talk to myself, how do I talk to my family, as in my siblings and things like that, and then my wife and kids and things like that. There's lessons to be learned from all of this, but we got to take it in stride. We have to take it in baby steps, and we have to realize that just because it affects only one arena doesn't mean it doesn't have a ripple effect in other places, right? So how you do one thing is how you do everything.
I really like that quote, and you know, I do find concrete examples to be very helpful there. So not to put you on the spot or anything, but since you brought up cooking and you said you used to be a bad cook,
Yes.
you know, how has learning to cook kind of given a ripple effect along in your life, and how kind of walk us through that process? Like, how did you start? Because that's what I think is going to be most valuable for our listeners, is examples and kind of actionable items on how to do it. Like the theory is great, and okay, this is what a growth mindset is, but what can we do to actually help ourselves adopt that kind of attitude?
Yeah, so it takes a little bit of the looking inward to have that discussion with yourself and kind of like, all right, let's talk about this. Like, what's going wrong? What am I doing wrong? So I'll use the example of cooking. I was very impatient to start. That was usually the big thing. Patience is, you need a lot of patience when it comes to cooking. But I think the other issue I ran into, because I was just like the base layer thing, I would burn things. And I was like, okay, that just means, you know, I wasn't patient enough, or like I put the heat way too high thinking that, oh, I'm going to cut some time off. And like, no, that's not how that works sometimes. But what I also found is that I was too much of a perfectionist, where, oh, I needed this exact amount of ingredients. And this is why I have a hard time with baking. I want to learn how to bake. Rachel's the baker. You know, I'll give her that. I'll leave that in her realm. But baking requires a lot of precision. You have to have the exact amount of ingredients, because in order to make it work appropriately, it has to be that way. Cooking's not like that. It can be more ambiguous. If it needs a teaspoon of salt, maybe you don't really taste it. Maybe I want to add more. You can kind of wing it a little bit and be kind of you have the lines there, but that doesn't mean you can't draw outside of them a little bit, and make it your own, and kind of like, oh, I like these spices more. I like my food a little bit spicier, or I want to dull back the seasoning a little bit. I like it a little bit less bland, and just add like sauces later, things like that. So I had to learn that I don't have to necessarily follow a recipe to the T and hope for absolute perfection at the end, because it never looks, even when you do that, it never looks how it should. It's just the expectation is way too high in the back of my head, and then suddenly I see it and it's like, oh, I didn't live up to it at all.
So those Instagram photos of people's food is not the reality for most of us.
I mean, it's doctored, you know. Like, my favorite is when you see someone post, what is it, like Denny's post like the photos of like pancakes or IHOP, and you see the syrup just being on top of it, and like, oh, it's so beautiful. It looks like it stays on there, and then you realize that, hey, syrup gets soaked up by these pancakes, so they use motor oil instead to take those majestic photos that we all strive to take and put on our Instagram. And it's like, oh, never mind.
So like you said, expectation there. So there's, I think we were just talking about it. Greg Everett put out a great quote today about expectation versus intention. And it's kind of that same idea of, if I go in with these high expectations, I am setting myself up for failure. If I don't meet my expectations, then something went wrong. Yeah. And I think back to your earlier example of the lifts for max effort snatch, max effort clean. If I go in with that expectation that I'm going to hit the lift and I miss, I am inherently a failure because I didn't meet my expectations. But if I go in with the intention that I'm going to give it my best shot, that gives us that room to miss. Yeah. So I think that's kind of an important piece of it as well. And it's exactly what you said about cooking, having that expectation of it's going to be perfect. Yeah. And maybe good enough is acceptable. Is it edible?
That's, and at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's like, can I eat it and not have to run to the bathroom a little bit later? Okay, cool. Then I have a success here in my hands, whether I like it or not. It's funny because I think back to that day when I think I was coaching for the max snatch.
I think it was a Sunday. So
yeah, it was a Sunday. Right. So it was a max snatch. And I remember one of the things I kind of mentioned to people when I was kind of briefing them at the whiteboard was, hey, if your body's, I'm a big proponent for letting your body kind of dictate how you feel, right? If you come into this and as you're going up in weight, you feel like, oh, this is great. You know, I feel great. And it's like, I feel a lot snappier. I feel like I'm moving the bar really, really well. Then that's kind of like the green flag that, hey, let it rip, right? Go for it. Why not? But if you get up to like 75% and suddenly it feels like 1,000 pounds, probably a good indication today's not the day. But it goes back to kind of the next thing that I would think of is like small wins and big wins, right? Because we're all striving for the PR, and that's kind of the double-edged sword when it comes to like max day, because everyone wants the PR. Everyone's focused on the PR and like, oh, I want it so badly. Oh, I want it so badly. And then when it doesn't happen, they feel like it's a failure. I was like, oh, this was a bad day of training or anything like that. But maybe they missed the PR. But maybe when they went up to like 85, 90% and they went for that lift, it was a lot cleaner. It was a lot snappier. It was a lot better looking.
They hit their positions.
Yeah, and then the mechanics of it were just better than what they were before. That's a win in itself. That means you're starting to get the idea of, okay, I know how to move my body now. I'm understanding what I need to do to get underneath the bar, to receive the bar appropriately. Now I just have to apply it to a heavier weight, little by little.
I think that's a very, very good perspective, and it also brings up the question of, what is our goal with that day? And I know there are numerous coaches out there that don't have people max out really ever, and it kind of brings up the question, why do we even bother with PRs, and why do we bother testing in the first place, and what is it that we're really trying to achieve? And honestly, the reason we do a lot of percentage-based training because it takes kind of the thinking out of it for the most part. Yeah. The other option is reps in reserve or the RPE scale. And as we're talking about mindset, there's a lot of self-talk that goes into that, and being self-aware of your own thoughts and how you're talking to yourself. And it kind of goes, again, using the fitness space as an example, how many people really know themselves well enough to know that was truly an 8 out of 10, or that was, I'm leaving 3 reps in reserve. It takes a lot of experience to know yourself that way.
Yeah.
So we use percentages as a guideline because it removes that thought process for the most part, but then we do need to tweak it. As you said, listen to your body, and if 75% is feeling awful, then maybe we tweak it. Or maybe we're having a day where we're only supposed to hit 90% and it's flying up. Maybe we have somebody attempt a PR that day because it happens to be there.
Yeah.
But really, what is it we're trying to do on these so-called max effort days is the adaptation that we're going for is maximal power output. So whatever you're capable of that day, whether or not it's a new PR or not, you're still hitting the goal of that workout. And I think that is a huge part of our job as coaches, is to help manage expectations a little bit and convey what it is we're trying to do. And then, like you said, small goals. If I'm hitting the goal of that workout, that's a big victory.
Yeah. And don't get obsessed with the number 0 or 5. If you move 1 pound more, that's a huge success. I think a lot of us I want a 5 pound PR, or I want the 10 pound PR. I want a nice round number, not the half pound.
Yeah. And, unfortunately, the reality is the longer you train, the smaller those numbers are going to be. And I mean, you look at world records, they're broken in 1 kilo increments.
Yeah.
Well, for the most part. Every now and again, we've had a number of members that were stuck on front squats or what have you. And then if you fix something big, like you got a structural issue, I can't get into a solid front rack position and I'm limited by, the pain in my wrists because I'm not in a great position. And then you fix it, that's when you're going to see, we've had people hit like 150 pound PRs, but that is not the norm. And those are rare occurrences.
Yeah, but that's also a lesson there too when it comes to like the mindset thing, because it's like, oh, I'm limited by how my body is. Or my personal favorite, this has always been my favorite one, age. Oh, I'm too old to do this. I'm too old to do all of this. It's like, you're not old enough to live though. It's like, we're all sucking at life. This is just helping us live a little bit better. I want to be able to sit down in a chair by myself and not have to hang onto a table as I lower myself down into the chair.
It comes back to, I think I did a video a few months ago on our mission as a gym, and it comes back to the longevity versus vitality debate. Like, are you just living longer, or is your quality of life better? Like, do I really want to stay alive for the last 10 years and be helped along by machines and be bedridden? No, I'd rather be hit by a bus, end it clean and quick.
Yeah.
Can I live my life and do what I want to do? Without being limited physically.
Yeah.
So, absolutely there. And just a quick lesson for everybody that does argue that you're too old for this. Unless you were a competitive power lifter, high-level athlete in your 20s and 30s, you probably haven't hit your physical potential. So even as you age, especially if you're getting into fitness at an older age, your ceiling is still very, very high, and there is a lot that you can do.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like even now, I'm at my fittest point right now than I was at any point during my 20s, which is insane to think about because I'm training way less than I did when I was 20s because, that was the cool thing back when you were 20-something. I'm going to do all the workouts every day for 4 hours.
I don't know that I did that in my 20s, but I still look back. I think the most active I was going into my senior year of high school. I would bike to school because we had to do our training for football. So we had plyometrics, then we would lift, then we had agilities. Then I would bike home. I would go run 5 miles. I would nap. And then I was a lifeguard in the late morning, early afternoon, so I would go to work and swim a mile prior to lifeguarding. And I think some days I would actually go to like Workout World and do like extra bodybuilding exercises and stuff too. But when that's your entire day, you can get away with it. And when you're young, you're resilient and you recover from it.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you said that, because I keep trying to harp on this with other people, is you can only recover from so much.
Yeah.
And recovery is more than half the battle. And especially as you progress in life and you have other stresses. You know, when I was trying to commiserate with some masters athletes back when I was 26. So a decade ago at this point. You know, doing CrossFit at 23, you could go out drinking till 11 p.m., wake up for the 6 a.m. workout, and be none the worse for wear. You're fine.
Everything's fine.
And by 26, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, no.
And so you try to tell people, like, oh, I can only imagine how bad it is for you at age 42. And they're like, you're still young. What the hell are you talking about? It's like, no, I'm acknowledging that in those 3 years, a lot's changed. I can only imagine what happens going forward.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you say that. It reminds me of a phenomenal Louis Simmons quote, which is, you don't want to train maximally. That's stupid. Training minimally is for pussies. You want to train optimally. So it's, am I doing enough to achieve the response that I'm going for, and can I recover from it? And I think that's, again, since we're talking about mindset, it comes down to, do we know the goal of the session? What is this going to do for us? Mm-hmm. Are we hitting that and getting out? And it brings up another point, like if you're not sore and wrecked all the time, I think I covered this in our blog post last week. It was a conversation I've had with members. Just because you're not sore doesn't mean you're not getting better.
Oh, yeah, no.
And, you know, do you want to be walking through life completely sore all the time?
Never.
You know, imagine you said you're fitter now than you were in your 20s, but that was kind of the, oh, God, I totally wrecked myself in this workout. Or,
yeah,
I mean, I remember
walking funny.
Look how much I messed up my hands, you know, all the hundreds of kipping pull-ups and your hands are ripped to hell. And
yeah. It's like a badge of honor.
Yep.
Back then. Now, that was stupid. Hindsight's always 20/20 there.
Well, the hope is trying to get younger athletes to recognize that, and it doesn't always work.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. There's just going to always be a thing. Like, I always like to use the, what's it called? The hierarchy of a athlete that we're learning level 1. And I always like to change that, especially when it comes to an affiliate, and change the top from sport to like life instead. Like, us as coaches, we're only responsible for everything below that point of the pyramid. Like when it comes to the weightlifting, the gymnastics, metabolic conditioning, and to an extent the nutrition, we're going to give you as many tools as we possibly can. How you use them is entirely up to you. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but I'm going to give you as much of myself in terms of examples and other examples that I've seen and I've experienced and heard from other people. I'm going to give you as much as I can so that you're able to succeed. Unfortunately, I can't hold your hand the entire time. So we need to learn how to push ourselves. And sometimes it takes a little bit of self-talk to get there. And that's why evaluating how you talk to yourself goes a long way.
So people always talk about positive self-talk.
Okay.
What would be some examples? Like, obviously, we're, again, talking about the fitness space. Let's say you're in the middle of your 500-meter row intervals that you did today.
Jesus Christ.
How do you talk to yourself? And how do you take that step back to be aware of how you're talking to yourself?
There was definitely moments in that. I would say definitely by number 3, I want to stop. And that's a very relatable one, I feel like. Once you get to like a very uncomfortable, everyone's level for how uncomfortable they can make themselves is like, it varies from person to person. And I was definitely getting to that point where I was like, I kind of don't want to do this anymore. I'm kind of done. But I know it's like, okay, I know I have a little bit more, because at that point, I think the goal was for me today was keep the pace of a 500-meter row at 150 or below. I was still at 148. It's like, I still have 2 seconds to play with. There's no reason why I should stop right now when I have those 2 seconds to play with. Yes, I might start creeping towards the 49, but then I have the entirety of that 49, the 0.0 all the way down to the 9 to play with. So I can give a little bit more. I can give a little bit more. It's like, just a little bit more. Let's try it and see how it feels. Just keep moving. Let's see how it feels. And
so for the row in particular, you're looking specifically at those numbers and you're trying to focus on the numbers. Yeah. And that, would you say that distracts you from the pain you're feeling?
A little bit. And it definitely helps for like the first half. The first 250, it's like, all right, I've hit my stride. Everything's kind of like, all right, my form, I'm focusing on my form, my breathing, keeping an eye on that number. Okay, where am I? All right, cool. Maybe should I slow it down just a hair, or don't pull as hard. Save it for the back half, because I know the back half is where it's going to hurt the most, because that's when everything starts to scream in terms of muscular fatigue, and it's telling me, hey, you should really stop. Hey, I don't want to do this anymore. You need to stop. It's like, no, we're almost there. Just a little bit more. And then once I get past the 250 mark and get to like 300, and it's like, I have 200 meters left. All right, I have 150. I have 100 left. There's 50 more meters. Then I start breaking it down in increments and just keep moving, keep breathing, and just push through it, and until I get to the end. And if I hit the number, perfect, cool. Guess what? I get to do it again. If I don't, then it stops. So I learned something.
You're really playing mind games with yourself to try to keep yourself going.
A little bit, yeah.
Do you ever count strokes?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
So I always tell people when I row, I mean, I grew up playing musical instruments, and, you know, piano was kind of self-contained, but when you play the trumpet, you have long periods of rest where you're not playing, and they teach you to count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, and you're counting the meters of rest. And they use those strategies, and I swear to God, that's how I count my strokes.
Yeah,
that's what I'm focused on. Is time be damned. It's how many hard pulls do I need? When can I back off? And again, it does take knowing yourself a little bit as an athlete, but people always talk about, can you crank up the music? I don't want to hear myself breathe, and I almost feel like you should do the opposite.
Yeah, sometimes you need to have that happen. The thing is like my tolerance for it's not pain. It's definitely my tolerance for being as uncomfortable as possible is a lot higher than most. It's just through life experience and kind of where I've come from, as my tolerance for that kind of like uncomfortable feeling. I can kind of live there if I need to. Do I want to be there? No one wants to be there. No one ever wants to be there. But can I keep myself there because I know the light is at the end of the tunnel, for sure. How do I translate that, and how do I relate that to someone that's never done that before?
That is the question.
Because that's always fun, and it's an interesting topic, because it's something I've thought about. Like, as coaches, for a lot of us, we were competitive in some way, shape, or form, whether it be through high school sports, whether it be club sports, college, or anything like that. But then what if you encountered the person that was in band? I was a band geek, by the way. I gave that up for swimming after 9th grade, but when someone's never had that competitive background, how do you relate to that? I think for a lot of us, coaches included, we need to maybe take a step back. It's like, okay, can I remember a time when I felt that way? Can I think back to that time? Can I find an example of someone that's done something similar, who comes from a similar background, and bring them into the fold? It's like, how did you do this? What kind of self-talk did you have? How did you motivate yourself to kind of keep pushing it? And how do you do this when it comes to competitive, like not necessarily competitive setting, but like when it comes to like attacking a workout? Like, hey, I'm going to go this way because I know myself well enough that if I do it any other way, it's not going to go very well, and I'm not going to enjoy it. And it takes away the enjoyment of the class, and kind of the point of being there is to make yourself better. So how do we do that? That's always the question. That's the hardest thing in the world to kind of answer, because everyone's different. Everyone's got a different motivation. Some people don't care about examples. Well, then how do we motivate them? We need to get into that head, and I want to see. And usually, you can get a good idea of what they are and kind of like how they think of themselves, how they view the world, by what kind of goals do they want to set. Because their goal setting can usually give you a lot. And when we talk about goals, we're not talking about just like, oh, I want to do this, but there's no finite timeline. There's nothing going on. We're talking about like, all right, I want to get more in depth in that. Obviously, with the military background, it comes in a very specific way from me, where I like to take the 10,000 foot view, but then slowly okay, this is the big goal. How do I get there? And that creates the smaller goals underneath. So
the strategy and the tactics behind it.
Yeah, the small versus big goals and the wins that come with them as well.
And real quick, before we delve into it, just a quick plug to all our members. You will be getting an email about setting a goal-setting session with me now that I am coaching significantly fewer classes, I'm getting more personally involved in your success, which means look for that email, take the 5 to 10 minutes to talk to me about your goals, and we'll figure out how to get there. So quick little plug there. You'll be getting that in the new year.
And there you go. See, I'm so good at this. This is great.
Yeah. And, honestly, that's a big part of it is communication. How do we know what your goals are? We can tell you what the goal of the workout is, but it's fitting that we're doing this podcast towards the end of the year now, because last year I did one at this time on the coach-athlete relationship.
Yeah.
And the big piece of that for our athletes is taking a little bit of ownership over the process. Sure, some people pay us because they want us to tell them what to do. But why? Why are you with us in the first place? We're trying to figure that out, and the more that you can look inward and tell us what it is you're trying to achieve, the easier it's going to be for us to help you. To quote Jerry Maguire, help us help you. I guess that would be a paraphrase. Help me help you.
There you go.
Exact quote.
Don't add us, please.
So again, and when we talk about the topic of goals, there's a small goal within each workout. The way that we program is each workout is the small piece of a larger puzzle that's designed to help you improve in a particular way. But that is, especially if you're in a group class as opposed to personal training, that is us kind of setting the goal based on an annual calendar that has certain events like Murph or the CrossFit Open. Boy. You're still going to improve.
Can't wait for that one.
Yeah, they're both on the horizon. You're going to improve your fitness in general, but those particular events are set by us based on the larger CrossFit community. So, we get people that want to do a muscle up. Is that going to help you in your everyday life? Well, maybe if we have a zombie apocalypse and you need to climb up a wall. But otherwise, it's kind of a cool party trick. And we're more than happy to help you get there. But the question is, why do you want to do it? And the more you can answer that, it could be, vanity is a very powerful motivator.
Oh, yeah, always.
And we always say people want to look good naked. Society will demonize that and be like, oh, you're superficial, blah, 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 blah. No, you want to feel good about yourself. Mm-hmm. And if that's a big piece of it, then that's a totally valid motive, and we can't dismiss that. Everybody's motivations are unique, and everybody's motivations are valid. But the more you can delve into what is driving that, the easier time we're going to have helping you get there.
Yeah.
So, like you said, we look at big goals, and now how do we get down to the nitty-gritty and start small?
Yeah. And to kind of touch upon that, because I think before you even start setting goals, it comes down to the why. And it's funny because it's like, if you want to get to a proper place where you can properly explain it in very few words, you need to have those conversations internally, and you need to figure out your why. And I'll use myself as an example for this one, because my why is very straightforward. The way I explain whys to people is like, when you explain it, it should be a very simple sentence that means absolutely nothing to anyone else, but you understand the power behind it. So for me, my example would be, it's like, I do the things that I want to because I can. And that sounds very stupid to a lot of people. That sounds very simplistic. It's like, I don't get it. What does that mean? And then if you peel the onion back a little bit, you start to realize, like, hey, for a long time in my life, the first 15, 16 years of my life, I was told I would amount to nothing by my own family, which is where some of that drive comes from. It's like, for a long time, I was told I couldn't do this because that's not what they need for me to do. Not that I didn't want to do it. It's like, but what if I wanted to try? And so now, like, I've kind of, when I made the switch and kind of made the switch into mentality and kind of changed my life for the better, now I look at it as everything as like, okay, I will try anything twice, because I know I'm going to try something new, I'm going to suck at it, and then I'm going to go do an assessment, take my time to figure out how do I get better at it and come back and make a nice valiant effort the second time and decide, hey, do I want to continue trying to improve on this, or am I okay with this effort? And then I can move on to something new. I want to be able to do things because I want to say I can do them. And unfortunately, at least, like, it's a funny joke with Rachel. She's like, I'm way too good at a lot of different things. It's like, it's just because I like to dabble in everything. I like to kind of put my hand on everything. Hey, we go to trivia all the time with some friends at Rooster Co., and we've been on a hot winning streak for a very long time, and we get very upset if we lose too. I think one time we came in second, I was very upset, but that's only because, like, hey, I like doing this stuff because random pieces of information I store in my head become useful somehow. And still,
that's why it's called trivia.
Yeah, no, it's trivia. Trivial Pursuit is not a fun time with me, by the way. So.
Well, I'm kind of the same way there, so I'm totally down for Trivial Pursuit.
Oh, okay. So this is going to lead to a little discussion later afterwards. But yeah, it's figuring out your why. Well, why do you want the things that you want, and to what purpose? At the base level.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because, like, to me, I like to know how things work. I like to know the why behind it, and a lot of people don't care. So when it comes to trivia, it's just things you find interesting. Mm-hmm. Or, with music, I get crap in the gym a lot because I will, I like the history of the bands. I like to know what happened, and I like to know what was going on. And some people are like, I didn't sign up for a dissertation with that. And it's fine, but I'm like, that's interesting to me, and I want to share that. So it's the same thing with fitness and kind of getting into the evolution of it. It's your own individual interests, and is that interesting to you? Maybe it's not. And then it's exactly what you said. How do you relate to those people that don't necessarily have that competitive drive or that same motivation? Yeah. So
there's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason why you walk in the door every single day when you come into a class at Viking. There's got to be a reason, and I would like to know. One, because I'm a curious person, and I like to get to know people because everyone's got a story, and so I enjoy people's stories because they have an experience that I've never had. Everyone's having a human experience, and I think we need to recognize that everyone's is different. So even though we might have come to the same place, your route to that place is different, and I want to know why, and I want to see how you got here, and I want to see what brought you here, what you dealt with along the path, and what brought you in here today. And I want to know these things, because then if I can learn that from you, and if you can articulate it, that does two things for us. And I say us because, again, the coach-athlete relationship. It allows you to kind of finally put words to it. What do I want? And then kind of focus your goals around it. And this is where you can kind of start mind mapping it, almost, so to speak. And me as a coach, I understand where you're coming from. I might not be able to relate, but now I have an understanding of what you want, and now I know how to help you and what tools necessarily I need to give you in order to get to that point. But we need to have that conversation.
Yeah, 100%, and that's why I plugged the goal setting earlier, that is literally the business that we're in. Yeah. And I can tell you over the last 2 years, that has been the transition that I have forced the business through, is that, I get crap for it when I say that we're not a CrossFit gym. We are a gym that offers CrossFit. Mm-hmm. That is one of the tools that we use to help people get where they want to get. Your motivations are your own. And, Planet Fitness may say they're a judgment-free zone, but you set off that lunk alarm and you're kicked out. That is a life goal of mine.
I want to do that so badly.
But we truly are a judgment-free zone. We will not judge you for your motivations, no matter, you may call it shallow. It may be superficial. It may be aesthetic. But
it's important.
Humans are visual beings, so there's definitely merit to that, and it's your motivation. Yeah. Who the hell are we to tell you it's not valid? Yeah. If you're trying to get below 10% body fat, great. We'll do our best to help you there. We may not 100% agree with it. We may try to help you realize that it's going to require a hell of a lot of sacrifice on your part, and you're not going to be having much fun with your life if you're doing that. Yeah. But if that's where you want to be, we'll help you get there.
By all means. And it's important to you, so then it's important to us because
Right.
we want you to be happy ultimately. That's
Right.
what it comes down to.
And that is really why you pay us. That is what coaching is all about. That is what we are all about, is helping you get where you want to go. And that's why you pay us.
Yeah. And think about it, like the lessons you learn too in the gym, whether it be during the snatch day or during a row interval or anything, and you can kind of translate that to other things, because if you start getting accustomed to making yourself uncomfortable in the gym, then when like uncomfortable situations occur at work or at home and things like that, one, you can talk about it a little bit better and you can handle it a little bit better. It's not just like a train that just runs you over for no reason and you're like caught completely off guard, I would hope. But the idea is you want to take these adaptations that you learn in the gym and apply them to other things. Again, how you do one thing is how you do everything. If you take the time to, hey, I want to make sure that I get in the proper position and be mindful of what I do with my own body, then you become more mindful of other things. The way I speak to certain people, the way certain people speak to you, how you act with certain people, things like that. It translates to other things, and it starts off as a little pebble, but the ripples are always there.
Yeah, I think we actually have this quote on our one of our bathroom doors. I think it's from Charles Staley. And it's, the gym is a laboratory for life. And yeah, we focus on the fitness space, but it's exactly what you said. If you can endure that hardship, if you can push through physically, because being physically uncomfortable puts you in a mentally uncomfortable state, and you see that light at the end of the tunnel, and you learn how to talk yourself through it. I mean, people scoff at it, but it was, well, hell, if I can push through Fran, I can push through anything. And it's like...
And then you do Murph, and it's like, never mind.
Fair enough. But if you are, again, like you said, comfortable being uncomfortable, or I shouldn't say comfortable, because let's be honest, nobody's ever comfortable being uncomfortable. But if you're at least able to tolerate it, and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you can manage that expectation, you're going to be okay. Yeah. And exactly like you said, is if you learn that in the fitness space, or hell, even cooking, when you learn that, you can apply it elsewhere.
Yeah.
But obviously, we've been talking for about 40 minutes now, and I do like to prevent these things from dragging on super long. So we've talked a lot about general mindset, having that growth mindset and positive self-talk and setting small goals and celebrating small victories and letting that kind of have that ripple effect. How do we go about doing that? How do you even begin there? How do you start? We talked high level. How do you get down to the nitty gritty and start? How do you throw that first pebble in the rock slide?
Yeah. I think the best example, because it's funny because we had this conversation after it happened, is, and obviously very few people are going to relate to this, but it was Worlds for me. So I like to do this all the time when it comes to like my goal setting every year.
You first off, you actually have an annual goal setting.
Yeah, I do like a mind map. So
Okay.
I put 2023 in the middle, and then I have my 4 initial bubbles are usually professional, personal, and then anything else I want. It's like family, friends, things like that. And then I just build from there and kind of see. So
I would say that's actually step one, is that you actually take the time
to sit down and
sit down and set goals. And I think that's huge. And I think a lot of people don't do that. And I know Schwarzenegger used to do that. He would set an annual goal, write it on a note card, put it on his mirror, and stare at it every day.
Yeah.
So I think that's a hugely overlooked piece, is actually taking the time to sit down and think about it.
But there's not enough hours in a day.
As we binge Netflix and everything else.
Yeah, I know. My personal favorite is like if I ask someone that has an iPhone, especially, like, give me your iPhone, and I can go to your battery settings, and it lets me know how many hours you spend on what apps each day.
Fair
and
enough.
It's like there's some of your time. It's like if you stop scrolling so much on Instagrams and liking people's stuff and getting all the likes in the world, and just give yourself 5-10 minutes just to think about, okay, what do I want to achieve in 2023?
Okay, great. So that's step one,
There you
is
go.
take the time and think about it.
Think like
Fantastic.
big goals. Like for me, again, I'm going to continue to use myself as an example, because it's the best thing I know, right? Worlds was an experience for me. And it was a very humbling experience because there was definitely moments. One, it was my first time competing at that level ever. And it was like a shell shock experience. And I definitely got my ass kicked, very thoroughly as well. But when it comes to situations like that, I still went there. I still got after it. Even though I know the result wasn't going to be exactly what I wanted it to be.
Again,
I still tried.
expectation versus intention.
Yeah, I still went with it because I wanted the result at the end. Because then I can use that to study. And that's exactly what we did. From there, it's like, okay, I want this to be a goal again. I want to go back to Worlds because I want to redo. And so from there, I take a look at everything I did during that weekend. We assessed it. All right, let's talk about this. What happened here? What happened? What could I have done better here? What did it feel like going through this, that, and the third? And I just broke everything I did down. So with that information, when I go into, all right, planning for 2023, I know Worlds is on that. In order to get to Worlds, I need to do the U.S. qualifier. So I know that's a step there.
When is that, by the way?
TBD.
Okay.
We're still waiting.
I did see that it's going to be in Canada
Yeah,
this
it's
year.
going to be in Vancouver. So that should be interesting.
Beautiful city.
Yeah. I've never been to that side of Canada, so I'm very excited. I would love to go there. I'm planning on going there regardless of anything. So then I know I have to do the qualifier. Okay. Once I know the dates of that, then I have an idea of like timeline training-wise, peaks and valleys going up and down. When do I need to be quote-unquote ready? Even though I don't like the idea of being ready. It's like, hey, I don't like having a wheelhouse. I don't want a wheelhouse. I just want to be good at everything. At least marginally very, very well done. Do very, very well at a lot of different things. So no matter what combination comes up, I'm confident in my performance. But then I take it from there, right? That's the big goal. Worlds is the big goal. Qualifier is the next step down from that. So then what does my training need to look like? What weaknesses, looking at my previous results and performances, what are the weaknesses there? My posterior chain, because my back has always been an issue. So that will always be number one, is making my back stronger. Just because I have a previous back injury, not my own fault. It was done onto me, but I have to live with it. But I have to make it work, and I need to make it stronger. Now I've done all the right things. I've babied it so much that I've healed. But now I have to strengthen that side because I know my midline, I know everything in my core is compromised because the front side is stronger than the back side. And you can definitely tell that I wobble a little bit when I lift because the back side can't keep up. So I got to make that side stronger. Okay, what does my training need to look like in order to facilitate that? What am I doing outside of the gym? What does sleeping look like? What does eating look like? Because that's always the big one, right? We all know what to do. We all know the right things to do, but chocolate is just so damn good. And I love...
Or in our case, bourbon.
Or bourbon. Alcohol is just...
Skol, by the way.
Cheers. But, like, things like that. Well, I start to assess everything in my life that I've done in order to... What do I need to tweak in order to reach that ultimate goal? So then that's where the smaller goals come from. It's like, how does my diet look? Can I clean it up? Yeah. Is it realistic to be super strict and super hard on myself the entire time? No, because those things relax. My favorite thing in the world is a 6-week challenge and how badly it does, how badly it affects a person's mentality afterwards. Because during those 6 weeks, you're being held accountable. They're looking at everything that you eat and all that jazz. But then what happens afterwards? It's over.
So it's funny that you mentioned that. We used to do a bunch, and we do a couple a year, and I actually had a member ask me when the next one is, and he's like, I need to de-fat.
What's that
It's
mean?
like, this is exactly why we're trying to move away from these challenges, is what happens the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And sustainability is a big piece there.
Yeah.
So you're right. Can I be 100% strict 100% of the time? No,
No.
even Matt Fraser can't. That's
unrealistic.
He's talking about towards the final 2 months of his prep for the games, he was cutting out steak because he didn't want to risk cutting his finger with a steak knife.
Yeah.
Like, that is extreme preparation, and it certainly takes a hell of a mindset to do that.
Yeah.
But we're not paid athletes. You're not going to do that for most people.
Definitely not. And like I take that into account because there's events outside of the world of fitness that are going to affect my diet.
Well, you just sent me a list of everything that you wanted to do for 2023, and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, we're going to need to...
Oh, yeah.
We're going to need to tweak some things and figure out what your order of priorities is there.
Oh, yeah. I have a laundry list of stuff that I want to do. But then the biggest thing was the first section that I sent you, or the little picture that I took at the very top, is like, hey, I want to get married this year. So I'm definitely not going to be watching what I eat or drink or anything at my wedding, because I like to enjoy my wedding because it's my wedding and things like that. So forgive me if, I take a weekend to, celebrate getting married.
No, as you should.
And like go on like a mini honeymoon somewhere and go somewhere. Like, I'm going to enjoy and have a good time. Because at the end of the day, it is just exercising real fast.
Right. So I think that brings us to a good point to kind of wrap this up and bring it full circle, is what the hell are we even doing? It's exercise, and it's to enhance your life. If it becomes your entire life...
Yeah.
I mean, if it's your livelihood, that's one thing.
Yeah.
If
you're
a
actually
paid
making
athlete,
money, yeah.
Great. But it comes back to determining your motivation, and then, as you said, breaking down what you want. So number one, setting what you want to achieve. Number two, breaking that down into progressively smaller goals. And then expectation management has to be a big part of that.
Yeah.
And willing to be vulnerable. And I hate sounding like a therapist here, but that is really what sets apart a growth mindset from a fixed mindset. And since we inhabit the fitness space, and CrossFit is our biggest program at Viking Athletics, to quote the end of World-Class Fitness in 100 words, regularly learn and play new sports. That is the piece that is frequently overlooked. Yeah. And as you said, your motivation is you want to do things because you can. Yeah. Mine has always been, I've never wanted to feel like I couldn't do something. Yeah. So I tend to focus a little bit more on negative things, and I suppose I could work on my own self-talk there. But I've never wanted to feel like I couldn't do something.
Yeah.
And, when I did the Sweat for Vets, I knew it was 100% not in my wheelhouse. It was everything that I hate to do fitness-wise right now, but I knew I was going to do it, and I knew I was going to finish, and I knew that there was no possibility that I wouldn't finish. I knew that I could, but again, my own expectation was, this is not what I'm focusing on. This is 180 degrees in the opposite direction. I'm going to be slow as hell. I will probably finish last, but I will finish. And it's again that expectation management and that mindset. And it comes from understanding your why. And like you said, setting big goals and then focusing on the little.
Yeah.
And celebrating small milestones and not having unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
So I think that is a good place to wrap this up, is being mindful of your thoughts and, recognizing, well, number one, cutting yourself some slack.
Yeah, we're human. Come on.
You're already at the gym. That's huge. You're doing better than most of our population.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, for our members, the 12 of you that happen to tune into this.
Yeah. Let's get 15. All right.
We are going to be focusing on having goal setting sessions with you guys. And it is not about judgment. It is about trying to better understand what drives you and helping you guys even more. Again, help us, help you. That is why we're here. And that is a big part of why we wanted to do this podcast. Is that's a huge part of the mentality side of things. So I'm going to turn it back to you if you have any last thoughts that you want to share before we wrap up. And
I didn't have anything prepared, and this is usually where I take out the piece of paper and like, all right, cool. Not really. I don't have anything else to say in terms of like that. I think we touched on a lot. I think there's a lot more we can definitely get into. This is why I like this format, because there's so many things. There's so many rabbit holes to kind of go with it. But at the end of the day, you need to live your life by your terms. So if there's any way that we can assist you to do that, you need to let us know. And we ask that you let us know and let us help you.
That is genuinely our motivation.
Yeah.
We're here to help. We want to help.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll certainly have you back. And I really do appreciate your opening yourself up and sharing your motivations and your experience and being vulnerable here. And I think that is the biggest lesson that anybody tuning in can take away from is obviously Nivi was willing to share, and that is step one, or I would say, I'm sorry, step two. Step one, look in. Step two, be willing to share so that we can help you formulate a plan and go from there.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, we'll catch you guys next time. I hope everybody has a happy new year. And like I said, look for that email from us. We'll see you in the gym. Skol.